Hello, my name is Bibi, and I'm a certified Iyengar yoga teacher. And today I'm speaking on behalf of the Iyengar Yoga Association in Vancouver. We hope that with this series of interviews that we publish on our channel monthly, that you will get inspired by our conversations with experienced practitioners, with our yoga teachers, and you will start or continue your yoga practices. And today I have invited Linda Shevloff to share her wisdom and knowledge about yoga. Linda has been a yoga practitioner since the early 1970s. She began her study of Iyengar yoga in Victoria, BC with Shirley Daventry-French in 1980 and did her Iyengar teacher training with her in the early 80s. Thank you very much, Linda, for finding time. And I'm very excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, me too.
So if we could start from, if you could tell us a little bit about you, how did your yoga journey start, and why maybe you have decided to become a yoga teacher?
Okay, it's a pretty long time ago now. And when I started, I had been doing some prenatal classes because I was pregnant. And the practice that we were doing seemed a little bit, I think the teacher must have had a little bit of yoga background or something, but because she was doing some things that felt really good and I hadn't done those before. I mean, I had done some sort of playing around with yoga when I was in university. It was in the late 60s, it was all the Beatles had come and they'd gone to India and all those things had happened, right? So I was in that era. And then when I was pregnant and I did the prenatal classes, something in me woke up about my body and wanting to do more with my body. So after my son was born, my first child was born, I started going to the Y and found a yoga teacher at the Y in Vancouver. I was in Vancouver at that time. And I started to take lessons there. And then my husband started taking lessons there. And we found this yoga center in Kitsilano. And I forget what it was called at that time, but everybody wore white. The teacher had a white turban on and they were in white. And it was, yeah. And we did a lot of meditating, looking at candles. And then we would do a pose and we'd come out of the pose and we'd either chat or we'd lie down in shavasana and then we'd do another pose, or else we'd do, like, it was just all kind of mixed up, but it was interesting and it got me going. And then I started exploring a little bit in Vancouver with the yoga, and I actually found a teacher, Maureen Carruthers, who's actually quite a well-known teacher in Vancouver, and she was doing a teacher training program in one of the high schools in Kits. And I started taking that training program with her. It wasn't Iyengar at that time, it was just Hatha yoga. And within 2 years, I was teaching yoga at a school in Burnaby at night. And I was doing it as an extra thing. I would just go and teach the women who came in, and it was in a kindergarten class, and we used to move all the furniture, and I would do that yoga class in there. And I was very young at that time. I mean, that was 1975. I was teaching.
Wow.
And I taught in Vancouver until we moved to Victoria, 1979, 1980. And I also continued to take classes with whoever I could take classes with. And I just liked it. And I never thought of it as being something like a life path or anything. It was just something it attracted me. And then in Victoria, when we moved there, I immediately wanted to find another yoga teacher, and I went into the YMCA, which was where Shirley was teaching at that point. And there was this woman who was just radically different from anything I had been doing in the last 10 years. I had been doing some Shivananda yoga too. It was very good. It was very good for the mind, a lot of it. Very good mental practice. But she had been inspired by this teacher in India, and Mr. Iyengar, and I just loved it. And yeah, and I told her I'd been teaching already in Vancouver, but a different kind of yoga. And I got on very, very well with Shirley, and she sort of took me on at that time, I guess. And it wasn't very long until she started saying, well, do you want to learn to teach this? And so I did a mentorship with her. I would follow her around. So I would go to class with her. I would sit and watch her teach. And then she would say, okay, you teach the next pose. And she would watch me teach. And we went through that for maybe a year or so, maybe more, maybe a year and a half. And then she just said, okay, you can teach now. And that was it. There was no assessment. It was like she declared, okay, you're ready, that's it. And so that was how I kind of began. And it was something that resonated with me. It resonated with me immediately.
That's very, very, very interesting. I actually had a chance to talk to Shirley, and she shared with me some amazing stories, of her hosting Mr. Iyengar at her home
Yeah,
and
yeah,
translating his text into English. And it's just amazing, amazing experience. So when
yes.
I'm listening to your stories, I feel like I travel in time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember when he came to Victoria, and it wasn't that long since we had moved there, and that was incredible. I'd never met anybody like that person in my entire life, and I wasn't even actually meeting him. I was one of the people in the room where there were several rooms at the Y, and it was set up so that he wanted to see the teachers teach. And at that point, I surely hadn't said for me to teach yet, and I was so relieved I didn't have to teach in front of him, because I can remember he came into the room I was in. Who was teaching? It might have been Marlene Miller, maybe. Oh, but he came in and he watched for maybe half of, oh, like not a whole pose, like just a very brief amount of time. And then he just took over, and he just, like, this is not how you do it. And then he started all over again, and he'd go from room to room, and everything anybody was doing was incorrect. And he showed what was correct. And he had such energy that you were just pulled into him, like every word he said, just reverberated. I don't know, he was amazing. And yeah, it was wonderful. And he was tromping around from room to room. He was quite a bit younger then, of course, and was very lively, and he'd go into one room and the next room, and he had Shirley and somebody else behind him who were sort of taking notes, and and he was basically disrupting everything. Like, people thought they were going to show him how well they taught. Well, nobody was doing that. He was explaining to everybody that we didn't know anything, and we didn't. We really didn't. Yeah, and there was a beautiful dinner in Victoria, and he stayed at Shirley's place, and
Mhm.
yeah, that was really quite amazing.
So interesting to hear you about the like the life
Mm-hmm,
experience
mm-hmm,
of being next to Mr. Iyengar. I
mm-hmm,
keep remembering that somewhere in the textbooks of the what does it mean to be a yoga teacher, right? And he talks about these different energies. Like, on the outside, you do need to be calm, like, bringing more kind of this calm energy and light energy, but
mm-hmm,
inside of you, you do need to have that kind of fire. So when you are telling it to me, because um, like, this fire needs to wake up and dullness in us, because like students have a lot of this, probably, kind of, to, especially like, would you agree with me that these days, when we spend too much time in front of the computers, and I think it's not only the scientists and researchers, but like probably majority of population, we're
mm-hmm,
just using our bodies as a transportation for our brains. So
mm-hmm.
we are not really in, kind of feeling and appreciating the wisdom of body. And so the body becomes dull, and we don't really understand how that affects our mind. How does it affects the way how we think? So I think this is why yoga teachers, like he says, even if you're calm and quiet on the outside, you need to have that fire inside of you as a teacher to wake up this dullness in students. Right?
Absolutely. So, of course,
Yeah.
in yogic terms, right, that's rajasic. That fire is the rajas,
Yeah.
and that dullness is the tamasic state,
Mhm.
and the sattvic state is the center balance state.
Yeah.
And he always used the Rajasic side when he was teaching a large group of people. That's how he would pull us out of our dullness. And he would also explain that's what he was doing. And then he did it, and he would do it, and he would do it, and he would do it. But then if you would see him outside of class in just a normal situation, he was just a very quiet, humble man. You'd never think it was the same person who had that presence on stage.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
energetic doesn't mean aggressive, right? Because I think that some teachers try, like, not young teachers. I did see it in a lot of London that try
Mhm.
to, like, male students try to copy his style of teaching, and
Mm.
that ends up sometimes goes into a little bit more like aggressive way of
Mhm. Yeah, I
communication.
think. Well, I think people get. It's easy to get kind of confused there for a while, especially when starting out. Because yeah, it doesn't mean being aggressive, but it does mean being awake. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
alertness,
wanted
right?
concentration so much. He wanted you to concentrate on everything he said, every word he said, and he didn't want to ever repeat himself. And if he had to repeat himself, it kind of meant that you weren't paying attention. You weren't absorbing. That
Yeah.
didn't mean he wouldn't teach the pose and give you that instruction again. But if there was something specific, or if he said, keep your big toe on the floor, he didn't want to have to say it twice. Yeah.
Yes.
And it was a lesson in concentration, but we learned the concentration through the body.
Yes, a lot of
Mhm,
alertness and concentration and focus that we do need these days, right?
mhm.
And when probably you heard about this, that these days with the social media and with our addiction to phones and gadgets, our span of attention shrank to like milliseconds. It's
Right.
shorter than golden fish have. So
I
it's
read that. That's so funny. It's just
yeah.
very sad, really.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And my question, I know also, Linda, that you didn't share that you have traveled the world, and you have did you have a yoga studio in
Yeah.
the part of the world? So I'm very curious about that part of your journey, and if you see any, because we I think we are opening up to the diversity, and like I'm always was curious, me being Kazakh and finding my new home in North America. I see that how different we are, and like different mindset, different languages. It's not only language but also um yeah, mindset, way of thinking, and perception, attitude, everything is so different.
Hmm.
So
So so I said that I got my training in Victoria, and I was living in Victoria at that point, and then so we were there from 1980 to 1994, 95 in there. So it was 14 years. And so that time I spent really with Shirley and also teaching there in Victoria. Um, and then we moved to Hong Kong in 1995. And my husband got transferred with work. And that was fine. And I'd also been a high school teacher. So I continued to teach in a school in Hong Kong. But I was really missing the yoga, and I didn't have any yoga community. So you move into a new place, and it was really a foreign place. But I did find out, oh, there's so and so who's got a little bit of yoga going, and so and so, and I tried to connect with anybody I could find who had a little bit of yoga going on. And I got invited to teach at some place where this woman I'd met had some students, and so we developed a kind of a little group. And I started inviting um, foreign teachers into Hong Kong, and we would do workshops and things like that. So, and we developed an association. We called it the Yoga Association of Hong Kong, and it was not Iyengar. It was all these different. Anybody who was anything interested in yoga could join. So it was everything. And what we did was every month, uh, one of us would lead a free workshop. And so if I was doing it, I would teach it in Iyengar style. If somebody else was doing it, they might teach it in Shivananda style or something like that. So it was just like a community, but very, very loose, very nice people, but not that many Iyengar people. However, I realized there was sort of a growing interest in yoga in Hong Kong. And I was at a stage where I was getting like, oh, maybe I want to pull back from teaching high school, and maybe I want to try to teach yoga more. Could I do that? And so 1999, I started teaching high school half time. And I rented a room downtown Hong Kong in one of those big towers, big shiny building. And it was scary to invest that kind of money in Hong Kong, but I said, I'm going to open a little studio, and it was just small. And it it went from being like a very quiet little thing to having people lined up in the hallway waiting to see if they could get in. And often I couldn't let them in because the room was too full. So it was crazy. There was obviously this big interest. And so when it seemed like that was okay and the business in the room next to me was moving out, I rented the room next to me, also the other office, and took the wall down and made a studio, a bigger studio. And so that was going really well. And that was going well until SARS hit. You remember SARS? Yeah. And then everything was collapsing in Hong Kong. And it was sort of like COVID, right? Except it was all in that city mainly. And it looked like, I wasn't going to be able to hang on to it. So first of all, the rent went down. And then the city was recovering. And then the rent went way, way up, like over 100% up, just like that. And there was no way I was going to be able to afford it. All these people had left. And so I closed that studio, but I decided I was going to try to find another space and open another one. And then I opened another one in an old part of the city, the oldest part of the city. And very, very local Chinese community. There were all these local herb businesses and everything on the street. It was, every time I think of that place, I can smell it. All these mushrooms and like things. And anyway, the room that I got was a beautiful shape, but it was really a mess. Like there was broken carpet on the floor. It was like the room was just in a very bad shape. And one of my students from before was an architect who did designs of the Macau casinos. And he said, well, if you give me free classes for the rest of my life, I will make this room for you. That was our deal. And so he did. And he completely, he made a beautiful studio. I paid for it, but he did the design and all the work and got the people to come in and do everything properly. And so that was just an amazing thing. And he actually now lives in Vancouver, and I still give him privates. So
wow.
That's funny. He's a Swiss guy. Yeah. So anyway, so I had that studio, and in the end, Michael, my husband, was retiring, and we were going to leave the city, and I was leaving that studio. I had quite a big student teacher training program there. Mm. And so one of the teachers who was quite keen and kind of, he'd been quite close to me throughout, George, he bought the studio from me and everything, and we moved away. But just before I left, Mr. Iyengar came to Hong Kong because he was on his way into China. There's that big trip. And so he wanted to see the studio, and it was just such a wonderful thing to bring him there. And we had events in Hong Kong with him and everything. And one of the teachers, one of the teacher trainees she and her family moved out of their apartment, and we moved Mr. Iyengar and his entourage into her apartment, and we brought in a cook who cooked there, and we had our lunches there, and we had a couple of days with Mr. Iyengar, which was really, really special. Yeah. So anyway, and then I moved to Vancouver, and it was a big change. Like when I came back to Vancouver, I didn't know anybody anymore really in Vancouver. I didn't have any yoga connections in Vancouver, and from having, I'd been teaching in China, and I'd been teaching in Indonesia, and I'd been teaching in Thailand, and I'd been teaching in Bali. And it was it was a big thing for me. My life was very full in that. And then I came here, and I didn't have that anymore. It was all, people, I didn't have students here. And I was also feeling, okay, well, what should I be doing now? And so it's been a much quieter time since I've come back. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it's had some big excitement along the way. Yeah. So
very interesting, very fascinating story. Thank you for sharing, Linda. So my question is that through your travels, because I'm fascinated by the subject of psychology, really trying to understand the motives of people behind, why they first get interested, come to yoga, and why they stay in yoga. Because I think this is really life-changing experience, was definitely for me. And
Yeah.
I like when you have these kind of insights, you think that, oh my gosh, people, you need to know about this. Like, you're ready to scream out and shout out on every corner of the street that, you need to give it a chance and give it a try. But I'm curious, like through your trips and travels, do you see any differences in the, in your students, that people that come on in your studio and practice with you, your students from different parts of
So
the
I'm not
world
quite
or
clear.
through the
So when you do you
time?
mean like, do you mean from somebody who doesn't know anything about yoga and then what happens to them, or do you? I'm not.
I mean, in different parts of the world or through the time, if that evolved. So it
I don't. Not really. I think
interesting. Okay.
everywhere, you know, it's a practice that it doesn't matter where you are, what country you're in, what nationality you are. It's because it's beyond all of that. And you can't tell someone what they're going to feel by doing yoga, and everybody doesn't feel something. Some people do, um, but sometimes you'll be in a pose and the way you feel changes. And when you start recognizing that, then you realize, okay, this is doing something for me, something, maybe I was in this state, maybe I was in this state when I came in, and now I'm in this state, and
Mhm.
the poses have done that. It's nothing, it's
Yeah.
the yoga that's done that. It's nothing but that. And I think people everywhere, when they respond to that, when they feel that, they want to come back because they realize, oh, something really special happens in this practice.
So it's really something like a unifying practice. What I hear from you, it doesn't matter what race you are, what religion you are, what language you speak, what kind of body you have, what kind of
No,
education you have. It doesn't matter, right? So it really
that's right.
like brings to the practice, to the reality, the meaning of the word yoga, right? So
Yes, that's right.
it's
That's
beautiful.
right. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I was teaching people who didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Cantonese, and
well, and you did
and
personal language.
and so that's when how in Iyengar yoga we demonstrate, right? We demonstrate poses, and so when I really had to use the art of demonstration because I
Yeah.
couldn't rely on the art of language, right?
Yes.
And so and people would watch, and you listen to the tone of voice, maybe the pacing of the voice, but maybe you don't understand the words, and yet um, would start to do the practice and be in class in a different language base and still be getting something out of it because it's the yoga, it's not the language, it's the yoga
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
does it. Mhm.
Thank you very much, Linda. I really would love to talk to you more and more, but we aim to keep these interviews like first one, and we hope to come back to and have a more
Okay.
deep and conversations with you, maybe about philosophy of yoga or some other topics. But the
Mm.
very last question that I would like to ask you, if you would be asked to give only one advice to the audience, what would you say?
Piece of advice. Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, practice is the most important thing, and paying attention to what's happening very sensitively inside
Mhm.
while you practice, I think is very important. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say in answer.
Oh, that's very, very, very wise advice. I do realize that, we think these days we have too much of knowledge, and we have kind of, can be very smart, but for me it's more and more important is to have experiential knowledge. So it doesn't matter how my day runs, I will always start my day with yoga and I will end my day with yoga. This is like brushing teeth, right? You
Yeah,
doesn't matter how you feel, where you are in the world, you're still brushing your teeth because
yes,
it's a habit, it's a second nature, right?
that's right.
And it's the same with yoga. If that's like 5 minutes of practice, 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 this is how you will get all this and great and realize and experience all these great benefits that are promised by yoga and Asian scripts of enlightenment and awareness and all these
Mhm,
things.
mhm.
Unless you bring it down to the mat, I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
So
it's not a theory.
yes,
Okay,
thank you very much, Linda, for your time and
okay,
for a great
it's really nice
journey.
to
I
see
really
you.
felt
Thanks
that I
for talking
traveled
to me.
with you.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Well, anyway, very, very nice to see you, Bibi, and thank you for the call.
Thank you very much, Linda. And our audience, please subscribe to our channel. Let's start this dialogue, and please post your questions in the comment section below, and we will be happy to come back and I will ask these questions to Linda. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.